Eli.
Yeah.
That violates your confidentiality.
No, my text messages are not in the confidentiality clause. Nothing to do with the show, with how I've been treated.
No, but you're revealing information about the payment schedule, about what the episodes have been delivered. That's not...
From the very first moment we tuned into Welcome to Plathville, the story was sold as a simple one, a sheltered family stepping into the real world, navigating faith, freedom, and fractured bonds. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the truth refuses to stay hidden? What happens when the people closest to the Plaths, the ones who have lived inside that world, begin speaking out, not about beliefs or disagreements, but about threats, fear, and behavior too dark to be packaged neatly for prime time? Hi friends, I'm Sophie and welcome back to Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and join the conversation in the comments, because this story is one you'll want to weigh in on. Do you stand with the people risking everything to speak up, or with the network that seems determined to control what we see? At the center of it all stands Ethan Plath and his wife Olivia, whose marriage has been one of the most explosive arcs on the show. We've seen Ethan's struggles with alcohol, with anger, with breaking free from his parents Kim and Barry's iron grip. We've watched Olivia fight for independence while Micah and Moriah try to carve their own paths. This isn't speculation, this is what the show itself has laid out season after season. But behind those familiar faces lies a deeper battle, one that pushes far beyond sibling rivalries or marital clashes. The tension is this: on one side, people like Olivia and others close to the Plath circle are raising alarms, insisting that real harm and disturbing behavior was happening. On the other side, TLC, a network with a long track record of protecting its biggest moneymakers, appears more concerned with image, contracts, and silencing leaks than actually confronting what was filmed. That's the line being drawn: safety and truth versus ratings and control. And that's where our story begins. From the very beginning, Welcome to Plathville was framed as something almost too strange to be real. A family of 11 children, raised in a world without soda, without television, without mainstream culture, homeschooled, isolated, told that outside influences were dangerous. Barry and Kim Plath built their household on strict fundamentalist values, presenting themselves as devout, dedicated parents protecting their children from a corrupt world. And that image, that picture-perfect branding of faith and purity, was exactly what drew viewers in. TLC knew it was compelling television. This family wasn't just quirky, they were extreme, and audiences love to watch extremes. But once the cameras entered Cairo, Georgia, cracks in that story began to show. We didn't just see wide-eyed kids tasting Coca-Cola for the first time. We saw something heavier. We saw children like Moriah, restless and defiant, longing for music and self-expression. We saw Micah, caught between loyalty to his parents and his dream of modeling. And most of all, we saw Ethan, the eldest son, already married, already trying to build a life of his own, struggling under the weight of both his parents' expectations and his wife Olivia's desperate need for independence. For new viewers, Ethan and Olivia's relationship is really the heart of the show's drama. They met young, they married quickly, and they tried to set boundaries with Barry and Kim that simply didn't hold. Right from the first seasons, the tension was obvious. Ethan wanted to please everyone, to keep peace, while Olivia refused to keep playing along with Kim's control. And as episodes unfolded, what we watched was not just a marriage in trouble, but a young couple being crushed by the competing forces of family loyalty and personal freedom. The alcohol-fueled arguments, the moments where Ethan raised his voice, Olivia's tearful confessions about how suffocating it all felt, this wasn't staged. TLC's cameras caught the raw footage, and those moments became some of the most talked about scenes of the entire series. Meanwhile, Micah and Moriah were writing their own escape stories on camera. Micah, who grew up with the same strict rules and isolation, shocked viewers when he began pursuing modeling. We saw his photo shoots, his awkwardness, his first taste of the wider world. And just like his sister, he was stepping outside of the bubble his parents built. Moriah's rebellion came in music, in her style, in the way she dyed her hair, performed songs and wore her defiance openly. Together, the siblings represented something that both thrilled and disturbed viewers, kids raised under absolute control, breaking away and discovering themselves. That rebellion mattered because it exposed something about Barry and Kim's authority. They weren't just parents, they were gatekeepers of image. Every time Moriah pushed back, every time Micah tried something new, it chipped away at the carefully polished brand the family had presented. And TLC, of course, played both sides. They loved the wholesome narrative of a faith-driven family, but they also knew that conflict sells. So season after season, they gave us just enough rebellion, just enough confrontation, to keep people tuning in, but never so much that the darker, more damaging behaviors could fully come to light. Ethan's marriage struggles made this tension especially visible. On screen, we saw his drinking, his outbursts, Olivia's frustration. These weren't isolated incidents, they stretched across episodes, becoming a defining storyline. But what viewers also noticed was how the show tiptoed around the most serious implications. Arguments were shown, yes, but the editing often softened their edge. Olivia's side was included, but in a way that kept the conversation framed as marital difficulty, not something more dangerous. That framing allowed TLC to maintain the drama without letting it look like something the network should be accountable for. And this is where context becomes crucial. TLC is not just a bystander. They are a company with a long history of turning families into entertainment properties, from 19 Kids and Counting to Sister Wives. The formula is simple: find a large, unusual, or ultra-religious family, highlight their differences from mainstream culture, and let the friction play out on screen. But time and again, what starts as quirky reality TV drifts into something darker. In the Duggar family's case, we now know about cover-ups and crimes that were carefully managed behind the scenes. With Sister Wives, we've seen how emotional abuse and financial manipulation can be glossed over for the sake of ratings. And with the Plaths, the same pattern seems to be emerging: real harm minimized, real people silenced, while the network works overtime to protect its brand. Think about how central image is to the Plaths themselves. Kim and Barry have always been obsessed with appearances: the perfect children, the perfect family, the perfect testimony of faith. When Moriah wears eyeliner, it's not just makeup, it's rebellion against an entire system of control. When Micah books a modeling gig, it's not just work, it's a rejection of his parents' worldview. And when Olivia speaks about how suffocating the family dynamic is, it's not just a personal gripe, it's an indictment of the system Barry and Kim built. Every single act of defiance threatens the picture they've spent decades painting. Now layer TLC's priorities on top of that. For a network that thrives on controversy but fears legal liability, controlling the narrative is everything. They want viewers talking, but they don't want viewers asking the wrong questions. They want fans to see Ethan and Olivia's explosive fights, but not to press too hard on what those fights mean. They want us to watch Moriah cry about her lack of freedom, but not to consider whether that isolation itself caused lasting harm. And when whispers of darker behavior surface, things that sound like violence or danger rather than just family drama, suddenly the tone shifts. Suddenly the focus is on NDAs, on silencing, on making sure those leaks don't tarnish the brand. That's the bigger picture we're dealing with here. The Plaths are not just a quirky family on TLC, they are a brand, a product carefully packaged for maximum drama and minimum accountability. And Ethan, Olivia, Micah, Moriah, they are the ones caught in the crossfire between telling the truth of their lived experience and protecting the family and the network's image. That's why the stakes feel so high. Because if the leaks, the audio, the journal entries, the photos are real, then we're not just talking about messy arguments or youthful rebellion. We're talking about a pattern of harm being brushed aside for the sake of ratings. And that is why whistleblowers matter in this story. Olivia, Veronica, anyone who chooses to speak out, they're risking backlash, legal threats, and public skepticism. Yet their voices are what pull the curtain back, what force us to ask whether TLC has crossed the same lines it has crossed before. Did the network know more than it let on? Did it choose to protect its show rather than its subjects? And how many people had to be hurt or silenced to keep that glossy image intact? By grounding ourselves in the show, in the moments we've all watched play out across seasons, we can see the bigger conflict clearly. This isn't just Ethan being angry, or Olivia crying or Moriah singing. This is a battle between truth and control, between real human pain and corporate image management. And once you see that, it becomes almost impossible to unsee. When we talk about Olivia Plath, we're not just talking about a character on a reality show. We're talking about someone who has put her most vulnerable moments out for the world to see, someone who walked into a marriage full of hope, only to find herself suffocated by a system she never fully signed up for. And for viewers, Olivia's story has always been one of the rawest and most painful threads in Welcome to Plathville. From the earliest seasons, Olivia made it clear that she didn't fit neatly into the mold Kim and Barry wanted for their family. She didn't grow up under the same strict rules as Ethan. She knew what it meant to go to concerts, to drink a soda, to wear clothes that weren't approved by a church elder. And from the second she joined the Plath circle, it was obvious she wasn't going to play along quietly. On screen we saw the tension unfold, Kim viewing Olivia as a dangerous influence, Barry treating her with suspicion, and Ethan caught in the middle of a tug-of-war that was tearing both his marriage and his family apart. One of the most memorable things about Olivia's presence on the show is how honest she's been about her discomfort. In confessionals, she's admitted feeling trapped, saying she couldn't breathe in the environment she married into. She's cried openly about how isolating it felt to be judged constantly, how heavy it was to be seen as the outsider corrupting the perfect Plath family. For many fans, those moments were heartbreaking, because you could see how deeply she loved Ethan, and yet how desperately she needed space from the family's control. The clashes between Olivia and Ethan have been some of the most unforgettable scenes. We've seen them argue in cars, at home, and even in front of other family members. There was that painful dinner where Ethan raised his voice, where Olivia sat with tears in her eyes, trying to explain that she needed freedom, that she couldn't keep living under his parents' shadow. Viewers could feel the weight of years of unresolved tension exploding in those moments. Ethan's anger, often fueled by frustration and alcohol, contrasted sharply with Olivia's pleas for independence. It wasn't just a marital spat, it was a collision between two worlds. And Olivia never hid the emotional toll. Time after time, the cameras caught her in raw states, sitting quietly with tears rolling down her face, speaking in confessionals about how hard it was to be labeled the villain. Talking about how suffocating it felt to be monitored and judged not only by Kim and Barry, but by the entire system they represented. These weren't dramatizations, they were moments that millions of viewers could connect to, especially those who have ever felt trapped by controlling environments. Her public stance against fundamentalism became clearer with each season. She spoke openly about leaving behind the strict faith she grew up around, rejecting the idea that women's roles should be confined to submission and silence. She didn't just talk about it, she lived it on screen. From encouraging Moriah to chase her music dreams, to pushing Ethan to think for himself, Olivia consistently positioned herself as someone unwilling to go back to a life where her voice didn't matter. But the show's editing has always been a double-edged sword for her. On one hand, Olivia was given a platform to speak her truth, to show the emotional scars of being tied to a family that saw her as a threat. On the other hand, TLC's choices often shaped her into a polarizing figure. Instead of consistently showing her pain and reasoning, episodes sometimes cut her confessions down to sound bites, making her look harsher or colder than she really was. Fans often debated whether she was too controlling, whether she pushed Ethan too hard. And that, of course, fueled the drama, exactly what the network wanted. Still, when you look at the raw footage we did see, Olivia's struggle is undeniable. She wanted love, she wanted partnership, but she also wanted to breathe. She didn't want Kim controlling her kitchen, she didn't want Barry deciding what counted as appropriate. She didn't want her marriage to be just another extension of the Plath family's grip. And she was brave enough to say those things out loud, even knowing it would make her a target both inside the family and among viewers. There's a moment that always stands out to me. Olivia sitting across from Ethan, explaining with tears in her eyes that she couldn't keep living in a way that felt like suffocation. She wasn't asking for luxury or fame, she was asking for the right to exist on her own terms. And Ethan, torn between his love for her and his loyalty to his parents, often couldn't meet her halfway. That disconnect became one of the most painful storylines to watch, season after season. Even when Olivia wasn't in direct conflict with Ethan, her discomfort with Plath traditions was clear. From family gatherings where she kept her distance, to episodes where she admitted she couldn't attend certain events without anxiety, her resistance was always present. She knew what those traditions symbolized: control, judgment, silence, and she refused to be complicit, even if it made her the outsider in the eyes of millions of viewers. Olivia's journey on Welcome to Plathville is more than just reality TV drama. It's a story of a young woman reclaiming her voice in the face of overwhelming pressure to conform. She may not have been perfect, none of them are, but she was transparent about her struggle, about the tears, about the anger, about the exhaustion. And while TLC gave us glimpses of that authenticity, they also shaped it in ways that kept the focus on ratings rather than the full truth of what she endured. What makes Olivia's on-screen story so powerful is that it resonates far beyond the Plath family. Viewers who have left strict religious backgrounds, or who have fought for independence in controlling relationships, saw themselves in her. They saw the courage it takes to walk away from an environment that tells you your voice doesn't matter. And they saw the cost of that courage: the public criticism, the marital strain, the loneliness. Through it all, Olivia kept fighting to reclaim her life. Whether it was by setting boundaries, standing up to Kim and Barry, or simply admitting her pain in front of the cameras, she chose not to stay silent. And in doing so, she became one of the most compelling and controversial figures, not just in Welcome to Plathville, but in all of TLC's reality TV universe. And maybe that's why TLC's handling of her story feels so loaded. Because when you watch Olivia's tears, her exhaustion, her arguments with Ethan, you're not just watching a storyline, you're watching a woman who risked everything to tell the truth about what it means to leave control behind. If Ethan and Olivia's unraveling marriage gave viewers the front row seat to pain inside Welcome to Plathville, then Micah and Moriah's journeys told the other half of the story, the rebellion of the younger Plaths. Where Ethan often wrestled in silence, Micah and Moriah turned their struggles into visible, unapologetic declarations of independence. And in doing so, they pushed the Plath family system to the breaking point, while TLC carefully curated how much of that rebellion the world would actually see. Let's start with Micah. From the very first season, Micah was presented as the golden son, quiet, obedient, and perfectly molded by the rigid rules Kim and Barry enforced. No dating, no drinking, no exposure to worldly influences. But as cameras kept rolling, Micah's storyline became the picture of transformation. He wasn't just curious about life outside his parents' bubble, he was ready to dive headfirst into it. His leap into modeling was the big turning point. Suddenly, this sheltered young man was standing shirtless in front of cameras, working with professionals, and being praised for his looks. For Kim and Barry, this was a nightmare. For Micah, it was liberation. On screen, he admitted that modeling gave him confidence he'd never felt growing up, confidence that came from controlling his own image instead of being told how to present himself. Fans remember those early photo shoots not just because they were bold, but because they symbolized Micah stepping into a life that his parents had tried to keep locked away. And with that independence came conflict. Kim and Barry saw modeling as dangerous, too sexual, too worldly, too far removed from the godly upbringing they prized. But Micah refused to back down. Arguments erupted. He packed his bags, moved out, and started building a life where he could define himself without their rules. The cameras captured both the tension and the relief. Micah smiling with new friends, Micah dating freely, Micah voicing openly that he couldn't go back to the old life. But here's where TLC's editing mattered. The show framed Micah's modeling career as both exciting and risky, keeping viewers hooked by dangling the question: would he go too far? Would he burn bridges beyond repair? Yet what often got left on the cutting room floor was the bigger truth, that Micah wasn't being reckless, he was building an identity from scratch. His rebellion wasn't just about photo shoots, it was about ownership of his life, something the Plath system had denied him for years. Then came Moriah, whose story was equally explosive but carried a more emotional weight. If Micah's rebellion was about confidence, Moriah's was about expression. From the start she was framed as the artsy Plath, the one who dreamed of singing, writing music, wearing makeup and exploring fashion. To Kim and Barry, those desires looked like rebellion. To Moriah they were survival. Viewers watched as Moriah's relationship with her parents deteriorated, episode by episode. Kim, who held the tightest grip, often clashed with her over clothing, friendships and music. Moriah's choice to dye her hair black, to wear darker outfits, to perform songs about her pain. These were more than teenage phases. They were public declarations that she was no longer willing to be silenced by the image of the perfect Plath daughter. One of the most memorable arcs was Moriah's move out of the family home. The cameras showed the raw emotion, the tears, the frustration, the bittersweet acknowledgement that she couldn't chase her dreams under her parents' roof. Her songs often told the story better than words, lyrics about breaking free, about pain, about finding her voice. Fans connected with her because they saw a young woman fighting not just her parents, but the entire system they represented. And like with Micah, TLC shaped her rebellion for maximum drama. They gave us her tears, her artistic passion, her clashes with Kim, but they also framed her as volatile, emotional, sometimes unstable. Viewers debated whether she was too rebellious, whether she was lashing out unfairly. But when you pull back the curtain, the truth was simpler. She was a teenager turned young adult demanding to live authentically after years of being told who she should be. What ties Micah and Moriah's arcs together is the broader theme of the younger Plaths pushing back against the system. Ethan's resistance was quieter, shaped by his loyalty to Olivia. But Micah and Moriah embodied rebellion in its purest form. They didn't just disagree with Kim and Barry's rules, they walked away, built new lives, and dared to show the world what that freedom looked like. The cracks in the family became more visible with each passing season. Holidays became tense. Family dinners turned into battlegrounds. Kim and Barry tried to enforce unity, but Micah and Moriah weren't willing to play along. Even when they did show up for family events, there was always a wall, a visible discomfort, a reminder that they no longer fit into the mold their parents demanded. And TLC, they made sure to capitalize on every second of it. The network highlighted the drama of the rebellion but stopped short of fully unpacking its meaning. They showed us Micah's shirtless shoots, but not the deeper conversations about identity and confidence. They showed us Moriah crying in dark eyeliner, but not the larger context of what it means to grow up silenced and then finally find a voice. The rebellion was real, but the way viewers consumed it was curated, packaged neatly for ratings rather than reflection. Still, even with the edits, the message broke through. The younger Plaths were no longer willing to be props in their parents' image of perfection. Micah found power in his body and independence. Moriah found strength in her music and her pain. Together they symbolized a generational shift, the moment when the next wave refused to inherit the silence and control that defined the family's past. And that shift didn't just affect Kim and Barry, it rippled through the entire family. Younger siblings saw the cracks. Viewers speculated constantly about which Plaths might follow in Micah and Moriah's footsteps. The show transformed from being about a quirky, sheltered family into a story about rebellion, freedom, and the high cost of breaking cycles of control. That's the irony of Welcome to Plathville. The very system Kim and Barry built to control their children ended up creating the perfect environment for rebellion. Micah and Moriah's arcs weren't just reality TV drama, they were proof that no matter how tightly you try to control young people, the need for freedom eventually wins. And as viewers we watched it unfold in real time. Micah posing in front of cameras, unapologetic. Moriah writing her truth into her songs unfiltered. Kim and Barry scrambling to hold onto authority that was slipping through their fingers. And TLC, sitting in the middle deciding how much of that story we would see and how much would stay hidden. Micah and Moriah's rebellion wasn't just about them. It was about every person who has had to break free from a controlling family system. It was about identity, about courage, about pain, and about the messy public process of becoming who you were always meant to be. When we look at Welcome to Plathville as a whole, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. TLC has always had its hands firmly on the editing wheel. From the earliest episodes, the Plaths were presented as a quirky family, strict yes, but wholesome, charming, and just different enough from mainstream America to spark curiosity. It was a formula the network had perfected with shows like 19 Kids and Counting and Sister Wives. Introduce a large, unconventional family, sprinkle in tension, but keep the overall package safe enough for viewers to binge without feeling like they were staring too closely at real harm. But as the seasons went on, the cracks in that image widened. What TLC sold as endearing eccentricity often veered into something darker. The strict rules about clothing, dating, and music weren't just quirky, they were mechanisms of control. The emotional fallout between parents and children wasn't just typical family squabbling, it was the unraveling of trust built on years of silence and fear. Viewers could see the pain on the kids' faces, they could hear the exhaustion in Ethan's voice, they could feel the sting of Moriah's rebellion, and yet somehow the final edit always circled back to an image of the Plaths as a family simply working through their differences. This is where TLC's editing strategy becomes clear. Hint at the tension, tease the darkness, but never fully pull back the curtain. Take Olivia's on-screen confessions for example. She has spoken about feeling suffocated, about not fitting into the Plath mold, about the toll of being married to someone still tethered to a controlling family system. Those are explosive truths, the kinds of statements that could reframe the entire show. And yet time and again they're cut short, reshaped or positioned as part of a marital disagreement instead of a systemic issue. The same goes for Micah and Moriah. We saw Micah stand his ground when Barry pushed back on his modeling career, but the edit made it look like a simple clash over lifestyle choices. What wasn't shown was the full depth of Micah's rejection of his parents' worldview. With Moriah, her music and darker fashion were framed as teen angst, conveniently sidestepping the reality. She was singing about trauma, about breaking cycles, about clawing her way toward freedom. TLC gave us the glossy version of rebellion, stripped of its raw, unsettling truth. And then there are the reunion specials and after-show interviews. These moments often pull back the veil more than the main series ever does. Cast members have suggested, sometimes directly, sometimes between the lines, that there's far more happening off-camera than viewers will ever see. Ethan has hinted at fights and struggles too painful to broadcast. Olivia has spoken about manipulation, about choosing to protect herself even when it meant pushing against production's expectations. Even Micah and Moriah in their calmer moments have implied that the conflicts we do see are only the tip of the iceberg. So why doesn't that footage make the cut? Why are certain confessions buried while family-friendly dinner table scenes are aired again and again? The answer is painfully simple. Image control. TLC has a brand to protect. They thrive on drama but not too much drama. They profit from tension but only when it can be packaged in a way that doesn't tarnish the network's broader appeal. The darker truths, the kind that might force viewers to confront the reality of emotional abuse, manipulation, or systemic harm, don't fit into the quirky family box. Instead, TLC doubles down on selective storytelling. They highlight Kim and Barry's attempts to connect with their kids but gloss over the deeper fractures those attempts fail to heal. They show Ethan struggling with Olivia, but frame it as a marital spat rather than the symptom of years of control. They let Micah and Moriah showcase their independence, but soften the edges so that viewers are left thinking of it as normal growing pains rather than open rebellion against an oppressive system. It's worth noting how carefully these edits serve the network's bottom line. By sanitizing the darkest conflicts, TLC ensures that advertisers stay comfortable, audiences stay entertained, and the Plaths remain marketable. If the show leaned too hard into the darker reality, it wouldn't just threaten ratings, it would expose the network's complicity in turning people's trauma into entertainment. And that's the uncomfortable truth. TLC isn't just documenting the Plath family story, they are actively shaping it. They are deciding what we see, what we don't, and how the narrative is framed. By presenting the Plaths as fractured but loving, quirky but relatable, TLC protects the illusion that the family is just another reality TV spectacle, rather than a cautionary tale about control, rebellion, and survival. So as viewers we're left with a question: what really happened in the moments the cameras didn't show? What was said in the arguments that never aired? What truths were cut from Olivia's confessions, from Ethan's struggles, from Moriah's tears? We may never know, and that's exactly how TLC wants it. Because as long as the story remains half-told, the network keeps its grip on the narrative. And that grip is what makes Welcome to Plathville more than just reality TV. It's a study in image control, a reminder that what we watch is never the full truth, only the version that someone in an editing room decided we were allowed to see. If there's one thread that has haunted Welcome to Plathville from its earliest seasons, it's the question of who gets to tell the truth. On camera, the story is carefully edited, softened, curated into a narrative that serves the network. Off-camera, the reality is far murkier, and increasingly people close to the Plath orbit have started speaking up. But here's the catch: every single one of them signed a contract. And those contracts, especially the NDAs tucked inside, are designed to keep the rawest truths locked away. Olivia Plath has emerged as the most visible voice pushing back against those constraints. Time and again she's used her platform to speak about control, about manipulation, about the suffocating expectations she felt not just from the Plath family, but from the machinery of reality television itself. On the show we see glimpses: her tense confrontations with Ethan, her discomfort at family gatherings, her declarations that she doesn't fit into the Plath mold. But outside the show, Olivia has hinted at the bigger picture, the things she isn't allowed to say, the truths she can only gesture toward because of the paperwork she signed before the cameras ever rolled. Then there's Veronica, who in public commentary and online discussions has carved out a role as another truth teller. While not in the main spotlight like Olivia, she represents a growing chorus of people who know more than what viewers see, and who are frustrated by the restrictions contracts impose. When Veronica speaks, it's rarely vague fandom speculation, it's detailed, pointed, and rooted in direct knowledge. And like Olivia, her willingness to push boundaries makes her stand out as someone unwilling to toe the company line. This is where commentary matters. NDAs, or non-disclosure agreements, are standard in reality TV. Almost every participant signs one before stepping in front of the cameras. At face value, they're meant to protect confidential information, things like production details, schedules, or the mechanics of how a show is filmed. But in practice they can be far more restrictive. They can prevent cast members from talking openly about their experiences, from criticizing the network, or even from clarifying details that the edit distorted. In short, NDAs don't just guard secrets, they police narratives. And TLC has a long history of leaning on these contracts. From 19 Kids and Counting to Sister Wives and now Welcome to Plathville, the network has consistently prioritized controlling the story. Cast members who step too far out of line risk legal action, loss of pay, or even being cut from future seasons. The result? A culture where silence becomes the safest option, even when the truth is screaming to be heard. Olivia's presence is so disruptive because she refuses to be silent. Yes, she honors the contract enough not to spill every detail, but she makes sure viewers know that there is more, that what they're watching is not the whole truth. In doing so, she pulls back the curtain just enough for fans to see the strings. It's a delicate act of resistance, speaking without breaking, revealing without violating, insisting that reality TV is not nearly as real as it wants us to believe. And Veronica's role amplifies this tension. She is a reminder that not everyone in the Plath universe is content to let TLC's edit be the final word. Her commentary underscores the reality that NDAs may limit what can be said, but they can't erase the memories of those who lived it. The more voices like hers and Olivia's emerge, the harder it becomes for the network to maintain its image of a quirky, family-friendly spectacle. It's worth noting that this isn't unique to the Plaths. TLC has a documented pattern of using NDAs and contracts to shield itself from scrutiny. When 19 Kids and Counting collapsed under scandal, the network's first priority wasn't transparency, it was damage control. When Sister Wives cast members hinted at deeper dysfunction than what viewers saw, NDAs kept the ugliest details off the record. Welcome to Plathville is simply the next chapter in a long-running strategy: monetize family drama while keeping the network's reputation intact. So what does this mean for viewers? It means that every emotional fight, every tearful confession, every dramatic arc is filtered not only through editing but also through legal silence. When Olivia hints at truths she can't fully say, when Veronica points to missing context, they're signaling that what we're watching is a story shaped by contracts as much as by reality. The unsaid becomes as important as the footage we see. And that's where the whistleblowers matter most. Olivia and Veronica aren't just speaking for themselves, they're challenging the system. They're highlighting how NDAs serve the network more than the cast, how image matters more than authenticity, and how viewers are often left consuming a half-truth presented as a full one. Their resistance doesn't just expose cracks in the Plath family story, it exposes the machinery of reality TV itself, because at the end of the day, TLC's priority isn't the healing of the Plaths, or the truth of Olivia's pain, or the cost of Moriah's rebellion. Its priority is protecting its brand. And NDAs are the sharpest weapon in that arsenal. They ensure that even when the cameras capture more than the network once aired, the people who lived those moments can't fully speak about them. The result is a cycle where pain is packaged for ratings, but accountability never makes it to the screen. Olivia and Veronica stand as reminders that the truth is bigger than a contract. Their courage to push the boundaries, to say as much as they can, forces viewers to confront the gaps in what they're being shown. And in a system designed to keep everyone silent, even those small cracks in the wall matter, because every time a whistleblower speaks, the illusion weakens. And every time the illusion weakens, the responsibility shifts, from the cast who can't speak freely, to the audience who must start asking why. At this point, we have to ask ourselves a bigger question. Is Welcome to Plathville just another reality TV drama, something to binge and forget, or is it a mirror showing us something far more unsettling? When the cameras capture pain, when editing trims away the ugliest details, and when contracts keep cast members silent, what are we really watching? It stops being just family entertainment, and starts looking like a system built to protect image at any cost, and that's the heart of the debate. Beliefs can be debated. Traditions, faith, and family rules, those are things people may never agree on. But behavior? Words said in anger, fights that spill into something physical, moments that put people in danger, that isn't about belief. That's about safety. And when those behaviors surface, even in hints and fragments, and the response from the network is silence or legal threats instead of accountability, it tells us where the priorities lie. Think back to Olivia on screen, fighting through tears, trying to explain why she couldn't keep living by the same rules. Think of Moriah, standing on stage singing songs about freedom, while her mother criticized her choices. Think of Micah, leaving the farm behind to model, to live to experience something bigger than rules. These weren't just quirky moments for the cameras, these were young people clawing for independence. And yet, the edit always left space for TLC to frame it as wholesome conflict, family quirks, harmless drama. Now add voices like Veronica's, echoing that the reality is bigger than what we see. And suddenly the picture changes. It becomes clear that these whistleblowers aren't trying to ruin a show, they're not chasing clout, they're trying to reclaim reality from reality TV. They're telling us there's more, there's darker, and it matters. And maybe that's why their courage stands out so strongly. Because speaking against a network like TLC isn't easy. The contracts are intimidating. The machine is powerful. The audience, too, can be quick to doubt, to dismiss, to say it's just TV. Yet Olivia, Veronica, and others keep pushing forward, even at the risk of backlash, even knowing they can't tell the whole story without consequence. That determination alone should make us pause. So here's where I turn it over to you. Do you believe TLC is protecting its show, or do you believe it's hiding reality? Do you think the edit you've seen across all these seasons truly reflects what the Plaths lived, or do you think too much has been cut, softened, or buried? I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And please, if you've been following this story as closely as I have, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next update. Every like, every comment, every subscription tells the algorithm that stories like this matter, that viewers want more than the sanitized version of reality, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about the Plaths. It's about how reality television works. It's about the gap between what is filmed and what is shown, between what is lived and what is allowed to be spoken. And it's about whether audiences will accept the illusion or demand more transparency. Olivia and Veronica have already made their choice. They'll keep speaking even within limits. The rest is up to us. So stay with me. Stay curious. Stay critical. And remember, what looks like harmless family drama on TV can sometimes mask deeper truths, and those truths deserve to be heard.